I mean, sometimes we get, us cyber guys, we get in our own little worlds and think nothing but, well, I'm preventing a hack, I'm preventing data leakage, I'm preventing this. But there's a lot of risk to business, especially nowadays. And you can't really understand the perspectives of the other executives until you understand what's keeping them up.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative and Wiz is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the best-selling CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as from other top CISOs and security thought leaders. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Tim Callahan, CISO at Aflac.
I had a career in the military and in the U.S. Air Force, and probably less related than many folks coming out of the military, but I was a bomb disposal, a bomb tech. Explosive ordnance disposal is what we call it in the military. And as I was getting out, one of the jobs that I had in the military as an additional duty, EOD units are all at the time anyway, small self-contained units. We had to do all of our own kind of administrative maintenance, all of that kind of stuff within the unit. And I always migrated to the additional duties of like information security officer, computer security, operations security, those kinds of things. And so when I came out of the military, retired, there's, about three things I could do. One, I could be a migrant bomb picker and just, go all over the world blowing up stuff. And, that had some advantages, but I really didn't want the travel anymore. I'd done that for 23 years and wanted a little more settling. But another thing that I could have done is obviously information security because of all the different additional duties that I had. And so I began working with a bank initially, not in information security. In fact, the third thing I could have done was construction program management because of military construction programs that I had worked. But I did that for a couple of years at a bank, and then got the opportunity to form a program management office at the corporate level for the information security function, which was just standing up. And again, now you're, early 2000-ish, 2001. So that really got me interested. And as I formed that and started doing different initiatives within that division, I gained responsibility and wound up, running the whole access management and PMO for that. And then was recruited to be a CISO at a bank in Connecticut. So I did that for a while. And what really drew me to it was kind of the same thing that drew me to bomb disposal, right? You always got a different event going on. Right? There's always something. And you're always preparing. If you're doing your job, you're preparing for that thing, right? That thing. You hope you never have to do it. But if you have to do it, you have to be prepared. And to me, that's just a little bit of the excitement of the role. I mean, there's a whole lot of things you got to do, just like in the Air Force, bomb disposal. There's a whole lot of things I did that were boring as heck, but it's always that expectation that you're really going to have to exercise your knowledge. And so that's it.
I think as we're closing in on about 100 episodes now of CISO Stories. I don't think we've ever had anybody that's been working with bombs. So I think that's that's great training for this role.
I think so. Someone asked me one time at a conference, what would I recommend for any, aspiring CISO? And I said, go disarm a few bombs. It'll really give you a perspective. So,
Yeah, we could probably talk all day about it. Which is riskier, the bomb disposal or security?
Yeah, yeah.
So today we're going to talk about how the CISO can make the biggest impact for the organization. And it's great to have you on here. I know you serve on our executive committee for the Cybersecurity Collaborative. Um, you've contributed a lot to this industry, and have had those senior leadership roles. So what sort of things do you think we can do to make the biggest impact?
Well, and this is something that I think is, kind of formed over the years that I've been in security and been leading the organization. I think one of the key things is know the business, and I don't mean that as a platitude or just we all say that, well, I got to know the business, but I mean know the business, right? Know how what your company's primary business is, know how they make money. Some companies are conglomerates, so they have a lot of business, but understand the revenue stream. What makes that company successful? And then when you really understand it and dissect it, I think it better informs how you can protect it and how you can share. And I think very closely, related to that is know the risk to that business model. And I'm not talking just the cyber risk. I mean, sometimes we get, us cyber guys, we get in our own little worlds and think nothing but, well, I'm preventing the hack, I'm preventing data leakage, I'm preventing this. But there's a lot of risk to business, especially nowadays. And you can't really understand the perspectives of the other executives until you understand what's keeping them up. Our CFO, fabulous guy, wonderful guy. But obviously, what keeps him is the expense ratio. How much are we bringing in, and how much are we spending, or what does it cost for us to bring that in? And when you really put yourself in that frame and understand that, you can kind of understand why it's so important that you manage your own budget and you do things economically and most efficient, because you don't want to be a drain to the bottom line. And again, if I want help from my peers across the company, I've got to be willing to help them too. And I think that leads to one of the other points is know how you can help them, know what you can do, what challenges they're facing. One of the things that we implemented early on at Aflac was, I established a cyber crime prevention team because as we were implementing some of our threat intelligence programs, as we were implementing our threat intelligence platform, as we were monitoring it and maturing in our ability to see what kind of traffic was coming in, we noted that there was a whole lot of weird traffic. And so as we pulled it apart, we identified quite a bit of traffic, malicious type traffic, or traffic coming in that would result in filing a claim, a false claim or whatever. And I'm not responsible for the fraud department per se. That's another one of my peers that's responsible for that. But what we found is that we could really help them in the normal course of monitoring the network and identifying anonymous or malicious traffic coming in. Even as simple as knowing, there's a lot of claims being filed from this same IP address. It's like, that's odd to have different customers filing claims for the same IP address. So learning that and then being able to help my fraud partners identify that and giving them information.
So how did you start that conversation to get, synced up with the fraud department?
Well, it was one of one of my peers, and by this time I was working for, at that time, the general counsel, and the person that was responsible for compliance was also responsible for fraud. And there's a lot of good reasons for that in the insurance industry, but we were just having a conversation one time, and as my security ops guys were noticing this weird traffic, and I call it weird because we were still analyzing it at the time. I started a conversation with him and said, "Look, do you have any mechanism to know when someone is filing a false claim?" And he says, "Yeah, we have some process for that, and it tended to be all manual or fraud schemes that are manual." And I said, "Well, here's some interesting information that we're getting. I don't really, at that time, I really didn't have anybody to kind of work it. But what we did is we decided to partner, and I spun off part of my conventional security ops team, and then hired some folks to be on the cybercrime prevention team. So, and then that just started building this relationship and building, I guess a bit of mutual support. And I've always believed that in any partnership, if both partners aren't getting benefit from the relationship, then something's wrong, right? So you always have to be willing to give back. I mean, oftentimes, we talk, a bunch of CISOs get around the table and one of these round tables, and we talk about it, and we talk about how important it is that we create awareness, and how it's almost we've got to educate them kind of mentality. Without thinking, no, we need to be educated. We need to, I mean, we've got to know how we can help our partners so that they can help us help them, kind of framework. So I think that's very important for CISO.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. So you touched on something, that we need to learn the business. And I know we've been saying that, for a long time. And I think it's something that a lot of CISOs still struggle with, that they're still seen as the IT guy. There is the techie guy that doesn't understand the business. So what sort of techniques do you have for actually getting to really understand the business? And then also, not just understanding the business, but then becoming viewed as a CISO that actually gets the business.
Yeah. Well, I think the conversations in the building is so important. One of the things I had the opportunity to do when I first came to Aflac, and it seems like I never had that opportunity before, but one of the methods when Aflac brings on a new VP, SVP, or whatever executive, they have a process of just the first 60, 90 days. They don't want you to do anything but meet people and talk to people. And that is so important. And through that, I was able to establish relationships, understand what my peers did. In some cases, I wasn't scheduled maybe with one of the business peers, but I would reach out and, I'd get on their calendar. The second thing I did is start forming an oversight committee. I called it at that time Information Security Oversight Committee. We later changed it as we expanded the scope to more physical, business continuity, everything, to a security oversight committee. But I went and talked to my partners about, look, security has to be effective. It has to reflect the business. It has to reflect our risk tolerance. It has to reflect our philosophy on compliance, our ethics, how we treat our employees. All that has to be baked in. And I'm forming this committee. So I went to the head of HR, would you be willing to help me, and be on this committee? Because I don't want to be creating policies that don't resonate with the employees or doesn't fit the culture, right? So I did that, the head of legal, head of compliance, etc. My counterpart, the CIO at the time, and then as we expanded, the corporate CTO, got all of these people to commit and developed a charter. that I coordinated and agreed to. And the charter didn't read like, a security committee as much as almost a fellowship of partners coming together to help foster things that would push the business forward. And then we developed, out of that, we started understanding as we were moving more into offering a digital experience to our customers. A very foundational part of that didn't exist was, customer validation and authentication, which, is so important. I mean, if you build a first-time trust with a client, and you do it right, then you can trust that client the rest of the life, right? If you do it wrong, that means you potentially have a criminal in your environment that you're trusting. So, I mean, we cooperated to build a positive user experience, but one where we could validate and we could better service our customers and give them the kind of quality service that Aflac is known for. So, again, it's part of just building solutions that reduce friction, that enable the business, and going past just the slogan and really making it happen, and then having a process and a regular cadence of checking it. Is this helping the business or is it not? If it's not, let's find a better way to do it.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think the having the oversight committees is so important. And I know in the CISO Compass book, where we, started this podcast series from, we detail out in there in the roadmap a step-by-step process for establishing that committee and having your policies flow through there so that you get the impact across the organization that's bought in by the different departments. I do think that's so important. So what sort of challenges have you had, in leading security teams that are the hardest challenges that CISOs can learn from to be able to better their organizations?
Well, I think, at the macro level, probably the thing I've learned most is the importance of good process and coordination and socialization, right? So, if you're coming into a company and you're establishing a new program, rebuilding a program, or if you kind of come in and you gap yourself, if you don't have a good principle-based program, I think that puts you at a big disadvantage. And by principles, it's those foundational things, and I'm talking, 12, 15 principles that you kind of get your partners to all agree to. Doing a risk assessment, knowing what your risks are, right? And then creating a program that is tailored to your risk appetite, create a principled environment. And the good thing, I keep emphasizing the principles, because when there's friction, you can come back to the principle as your checkpoint, right? So you're running along. You've got a principle, and then later on you generate a standard that starts to have disagreement. Does it point back to the principle that you founded on? So you can go back to your partners and say, wait, we all agreed to this. If we agreed to this, is that still true? Yes. Okay. This is the policy that generated out of that principle, and this is the standard that enforces that policy that generated out of that principle. Now, where's the disconnect? Mm-hmm. And generally, when you have time to walk through that, you find you get a lot better agreement. I've been in situations where I had to jam in a program very quickly and not be able to have that discipline, and it always comes back and haunts you. If you don't have that discipline and that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is great. What other tips do you have for building a successful security program so that you get the greatest impact in your organization?
Yeah, I think very similar to what I said earlier is just making sure that you have appropriate buy-in and understanding. And when I say that, understanding both ways, right? So, one company I worked for, I talked to the CEO and said, okay, what's your expectation for this? We had a dialogue around that, very frank discussion about, well, I can deliver this, I can't deliver that. Here's where I need you to help me if this is what you want. That dialogue is so important that, and it's got to be two-way, right? You can't adopt an order-taking model that just says, yes, boss, you told me to do it, I'm going to go do it. You've got to be honest and come back and say, the classic example is, I can't promise never to be breached. I can promise, based on this, this, and this, we're going to do our best there. I can also promise that we've thought through what a breach will look like. And I can promise this is how we practice, and this is how we, potentially would respond, under the scenarios discussed. But I can't promise anybody it will never be breached, right? I mean, that's ludicrous. But it's, I do think that there's been misunderstandings in the past between the security head, the CISO, whatever, and executives that, wait, we hired you and you said we weren't going to be breached because we hired you. And and again, we just can't do that.
Mm-hmm. How do you determine then the right level of investment that is appropriate?
And that is difficult. I mean, it's not. I wish there was a science to it, but there's not. It all gets back to tailoring your program to your risk assessment and your risk tolerance, socializing the risk tolerance with your board, your executive, whatever your governance process is. It's like, if you want me to have a perfect program or eliminate all risk, okay, it's going to cost this and I'm going to need an army of people, right? That's not realistic. So, let's figure out what that risk tolerance is. And certainly nobody wants to be breached. Nobody wants to have an incident. But at some point, you've got to come to, what would be an acceptable incident or what would be an acceptable level of risk. And then you take all the mitigating steps to get to that level. And that can be less or more expensive. I do think in many companies, and when I say that, throughout the different kinds of companies, you got your financial, heavily regulated, all the way down to manufacturing type companies, and they have a different level of risk and a different level of tolerance. Mm-hmm. And you have to know, for instance, if you're a manufacturing company, obviously, if your line goes down because your IoT devices that you rely on for the manufacturing goes down, that's a risk, right? That's a risk to income. And so, what is the amount of time that's acceptable for them to be down before it becomes critical? In the financial services industry, we got a little bit different, standards for that. I mean, we got a lot of customer information, financial information, PII, PHI, maybe. Your level of risk or acceptable risk is going to be different, because now you're just not looking at revenue, you're looking at secondary impact. So there's going to be a little more investment there. I like to use a model that I call the requisite capabilities of a security program, right? So you rely on basically, tried and true capabilities that are the very minimum you can, and you kind of set that as your baseline, and then you can calculate cost on that. Again, when I say capability,
what are some of those capabilities that you would have in there?
Yeah, so capability to me, and I guess I really would have a bit different definition maybe, but a capability is not just tools, it's kind of process, meeting technology, meeting people, kind of thing to form a capability. So a capability, a classic example is network access control is a capability, right? Now, as we depart from the network, maybe it becomes less, but it's a capability. But it's not just hunking, a tool in and saying, I'm done. It's understanding the information, understanding, the variations, having process around it, having, tooling, and then having people that understand it and operate the tool, right? So that may be one capability, and you can kind of price that one out. And so it's almost a method of identifying these requisite capabilities, which, Todd, you've been in this business a while. I mean, our requisite capability one time, 25 years ago was a firewall. I mean, you can remember the questions that said, "Do you have a firewall?" It's like, yes, passed. But
I have antivirus too.
Yeah. But I mean, they morph, right? But I'd like to say we get rid of things. It seems like we never really get rid of anything. We just keep adding to the stack. But I think that's kind of the methodology. And then you can quantify it to some degree then and go back to your board and say, look, for this level of risk, this tolerance, assuming we have these capabilities which equal, protecting this tolerance, this is what the spend will be. Or, if you want to accept more risk, instead of, having, let's just say a decoy system, right? Instead of having that, we'll accept more risk. We've got these other layers, but we won't have that. So I do think, it's a negotiation in all cases.
Sure. Well, this has been great, Tim. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. Is there any other last piece of advice you'd like to give to our CISO listeners, emerging CISOs, current CISOs, experienced CISOs as they go forth on this journey?
I think the most important thing that I've learned, and I learned this long before I was in security, is your most valuable asset is the people that you have committed to the team. So your team, as well as the broader team in the company. And, it's the old adage that John Maxwell actually said this, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think the most successful CISOs I've seen are the most successful people, being human and caring about and working and building relationships that are mutually beneficial. That'll trump any technology you come up with, in my opinion.
I think that's great advice, and thanks a lot for taking the time with us today, Tim.
Certainly, Todd. Thank you.
Wiz is on a mission to help every organization rapidly identify and remove critical risks in their cloud environments. Purpose-built for the cloud, Wiz delivers full-stack visibility, accurate risk prioritization, and enhanced business agility. Wiz connects in minutes using an agentless approach that scans both platform configurations and inside every workload. We perform a deep assessment that goes beyond what standalone CSPM and CWPP tools offer to find a toxic combination of flaws that represent real risk. To learn more about Wiz, please visit securityweekly.com/Wiz.